Exactly 75 years ago, more than 150,000 Allied soldiers landed in Normandy on France's northern coast. Operation Overlord, the biggest combined naval, air and landing operation in history, turned the tide in World War II and ultimately led to the liberation of Western Europe from Nazi rule. Well, today, the leaders of France, Britain and the United States, as well as Canada, have been gathering to pay tribute to all those who took part in the dramatic D-Day landings. Neil O'Reilly has this report.
Walking in step on hallowed ground, the American cemetery at Colville-sur-Mer, a corner of France cherished by both nations. In the presence of veterans, many of whom had witnessed comrades falling here, President Trump spoke of an almost sacred bond uniting France and the United States.
Our cherished alliance was forged in the heat of battle, tested in the trials of war, and proven in the blessings of peace. Our bond is unbreakable. From across the earth, Americans are drawn to this place as though it were a part of our very soul. We come not only because of what they did here, we come because of who they were.
President Macron invoked the eternal debt his country felt to the nations whose sacrifice had saved France in its hour of need.
France does not forget. France does not forget all those to whom we owe our freedom. I bow this day in front of their bravery. I bow to the immense sacrifice of the 37,000 dead, the 19,000 missing who fell as heroes on these Norman lands between June and August 1944, and most of whom rest here for eternity. I bow, and to our veterans and their nations, I say thank you.
And for several veterans, gratitude in the form of France's highest honour, the Légion d'honneur medal. Earlier at the War Memorial in Bayeux, President Macron and Theresa May came together to pay tribute to the British and Commonwealth troops who had died in Normandy.
Here will remind us of this. These young men belonged to a very special generation, the greatest generation, a generation whose unconquerable spirit shaped our post-war world. Here in Normandy, we will always remember their courage, their commitment, their conviction. And to our veterans here in Normandy today, I want to say the only words we can. Thank you.
Both leaders stressed the strength of their country's alliance, whatever the future holds for the UK. Neil O'Reilly, Euronews.
Well, earlier I talked with Cyril Forneris, a correspondent with our French service, and we spoke about how the messages of unity and cooperation contrast with recent tensions over trade and Brexit.
We definitely saw Theresa May and Emmanuel Macron set apart their political differences to insist on shared history between their two countries. And it must have been even harder for Emmanuel Macron to meet and to hide his differences with Donald Trump, who received him later on here in the American cemetery of Colville-sur-Mer. The two leaders are more opposed than ever. Emmanuel Macron, the French president, spoke insisted about the importance of the United Nations, of NATO, of multilateralism, things that Donald Trump has been criticizing a lot recently. Now, apart from politics, it was a very emotional day, and it was a very emotional week in Normandy. You know that around 30,000 people from all across the world came here to Normandy to participate in this 75th anniversary is very important because it's one of the last ones where veterans who actually fought on D-Day are still alive.
Well, Cyril, I know you've been speaking to some of those veterans who took part in that campaign in World War II. What sort of things have they been telling you about, those dramatic events?
Yes, we saw lots of soldiers, lots of veterans, mostly Americans today. We met a veteran today who told us that he came from a little city in Virginia where 20 people died in the first wave on Omaha Beach on June 6, 1944, and he paid a tribute to them on their graves. Another American man said that his grandpa had fought on D-Day, and both were very impressed and very moved to be here in the cemetery. I also had the chance to meet some Canadian veterans who actually fought on D-Day. They are more than 90 years old, and they all told me what it was like for them to live this D-Day and how important it is to come back here today, 75 years later. Now, I will let you listen to what some of them had to say.
It was organized confusion. Everybody knew what they were doing, but for watching all the Navy running around with all those funny ships and everything like that, and it was very windy and the bay was very choppy.
The main thing is you got to make sure that you don't get killed. That's about all it is. Yeah.
Our mission was to get the 2 radar stations and then regroup. And by that time, the paratroopers were spread all over the area. And that was where 6th Airborne Division had laid. So our job was to, as a second wave, was to take out those 2 radar stations. So the thing is, as soon as you land, you move.
I was just a driver. My captain, the intelligence officer was the captain. So he'd tell me drive there, I go there. That's all, yeah.
Our operations was to go over at relatively low level and bomb a very small launching site. We had to fly lower than normally, and we were shot at.
We came off the landing board in Juno Beach in about 9 inches of water. Oh, we were very lucky, yeah.
We started to clean out the inside of them. We used white phosphorus smoke grenades to get them out of the radar stations, to get them out, and then we took them prisoner.
There were 125,000 members of Bomber Command. There were 55,000 casualties. That's how dangerous it was.
It wasn't a matter of if we were going to win it, we had to win it.
When we went over there, we see bodies on the side of the road. Very sad. And we could be our own people too. Try not to think about it. It still comes back to you. It kind of haunts you, you know. Yeah.
The D-Day landings claimed the lives of more than 9,000 Allied troops, many of them just teenagers. Natalie Hewitt reports now on how the enormous operation was planned, prepared, and then carried out.
A defining moment in the war and for the generation of young men who took part. The Normandy landings, the largest seaborne invasion ever undertaken, was unprecedented in the scale of its preparation and execution. The vast armada of troop carriers, warships, and support vessels was assembled along England's south coast. The destination, strategic beachheads to the west of the Pas-de-Calais. A key element was tricking German war planners as to where the Allies would land, an unparalleled feat of deception.
The planning for D-Day was immense, and it operated on almost every different level. And subterfuge, confusing the Germans as to where and when it would take place, was all part of that, to the extent that they created an entire dummy army, a phantom army. We wanted them to think it was going to be in the north of France, near to Calais, shortest route across the Channel, so that we could convince them to put their material and their troops there, and we actually land somewhere else.
Fooling the Germans was critical. But the invasion force still had to penetrate the formidable line of complex defenses the Nazis had built, stretching along France's northern and western coastline.
Well, this was the biggest amphibious operation in history, both then and now. 156,000 men were landed on the Normandy beaches on the 6th of June 1944. Thousands of naval vessels. Ahead of them was a massive challenge. There was no guarantee of success on D-Day because they were facing the Atlantic Wall, hardened defences, troops dug in, barbed wire, minefields, concrete pillboxes, but they'd spent years planning for this.
Among the many unknowns of D-Day was how the soldiers would perform. Tens of thousands of untried troops facing ferocious combat for the first time.
The vast majority of men who landed in the early hours of D-Day had not seen combat before, and if they had, it had been limited. They were rookie soldiers. These were not professionals. These were young guys, but they were at the peak of their physical ability, their mental ability, and at their training. And you see that pay off on D-Day.
Establishing a foothold in northern France was just the first step. The battle for Normandy dragged on for months, taking a heavy toll on both sides and claiming the lives of up to 20,000 civilians, a high price for ultimate victory. Natalie Hewitt, Euronews.